Who was the richest person to ever live? If you search for the answer today, you'll find a rotating list of tech titans and luxury moguls. We are obsessed with the net worth of men like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Bernard Arnault. We track their wealth in real time, watching as billions of dollars fluctuate with every tick of the stock market. But if we look past the digital spreadsheets of the 21st century and travel back 3,000 years, we find a figure whose wealth makes our modern billionaires look like mere hobbyists. He was a man who didn't just own a company, he owned a kingdom. He didn't just have a high net worth, he controlled the flow of the entire world's capital. His name was Solomon, and he was the third king of Israel. To the ancient world, he was a legend of wisdom. To the modern financial analyst, he was the architect of the most efficient wealth extraction machine in human history. This is not just a Sunday school story. This is a case study in sovereign wealth, geopolitical leverage, and the ultimate cost of having everything. To understand the scale of Solomon's wealth, we have to look at the raw data provided by historical and biblical accounts. The most famous figure cited is 666 talents of gold. This was not his total net worth, this was his annual salary. In the ancient world, a talent was a unit of weight roughly equal to 75 pounds. If we do the math in today's market, 666 talents of gold is worth over $1 billion in a single year, just in gold bullion. But gold was only the beginning. Solomon's economy was a diversified portfolio of taxation, trade, and tribute. He turned a small, tribal nation into a global clearinghouse for the world's most valuable commodities. He sat at the crossroads of the great trade routes connecting Egypt to Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. In the world of finance, location is everything, and Solomon owned the most valuable real estate on the planet. Solomon's rise to extreme wealth was not an accident of birth. It was a masterclass in strategic alliances. He understood that a kingdom is only as strong as its trade partners. He formed a historic joint venture with King Hiram of Tyre, the ruler of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were the masters of the sea, the greatest sailors and merchants of the age. Together, they built a fleet of merchant ships known as the Navy of Tarshish. These ships would embark on 3-year expeditions to a mysterious land called Ophir. When they returned, they were heavy with gold, silver, ivory, and exotic animals. Solomon wasn't just a king, he was a venture capitalist. He provided the capital and the ports, while the Phoenicians provided the expertise. This partnership allowed Solomon to bypass middlemen and tap directly into the source of global wealth. If we were to compare Solomon to a modern billionaire, the metrics would break. Today's billionaires are rich because they own a percentage of a company that the market values highly. Their wealth is on paper. Solomon's wealth was physical, tangible, and absolute. He owned the land, the resources, and the labor of his people. He had a monopoly on the horse trade between Egypt and the Hittite Empire, effectively controlling the military-industrial complex of the Iron Age. Every time a chariot was sold in the region, Solomon took a cut. Every time a merchant caravan crossed through his territory, they paid a toll. He was the ultimate toll booth operator. While modern tech companies fight for user attention, Solomon fought for geographical dominance, and he won on every front. The physical manifestation of this wealth was the first temple in Jerusalem. This was not just a religious center, it was a massive capex project that redefined the skyline of the ancient world. The interior was lined with pure gold. The pillars were cast from bronze. The construction required the labor of tens of thousands of men and the import of the legendary cedars of Lebanon. It was a statement of power that shouted to every visiting dignitary that the God of Israel was backed by a treasury that could never be emptied. When the Queen of Sheba arrived from the south to test Solomon's wisdom, she was reportedly left breathless, not just by his answers, but by the sheer opulence of his court. She brought with her 4.5 tons of gold as a gift, which in reality was a strategic diplomatic investment in a man who could either make or break her own trade routes. However, wealth on this scale changes the psychology of a leader. Solomon wasn't just interested in accumulating gold, he was interested in the architecture of influence. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines, many of whom were the daughters of foreign kings. In the ancient world, marriage was the ultimate merger and acquisition. Every wedding was a trade deal. Every child was a treaty. He built a network of influence that stretched across the Middle East, ensuring that he was never at war because everyone was his father-in-law or his brother-in-law. Peace is the greatest catalyst for economic growth, and Solomon's 40-year reign was characterized by an unprecedented period of stability. This was the Pax Solomonica, a time when silver was said to be as common as stones in Jerusalem. But there is a darker side to the story of the richest man who ever lived. To maintain an empire of this scale, Solomon had to implement a system of heavy taxation and forced labor. He divided the land into 12 administrative districts, each responsible for providing for the king's massive household for 1 month of the year. The costs were astronomical. The daily food requirements for his court were enough to feed a small city. As the years went by, the monetary energy of the people was being drained to support the monetary ego of the king. The very infrastructure that made the kingdom famous was becoming the weight that would eventually crush it. In modern finance, we call this over-leveraging. Solomon was reinvesting his wealth into monuments and luxury rather than the long-term sustainability of his people's loyalty. As he reached the end of his life, Solomon's perspective on wealth began to shift from the analytical to the philosophical. In the book of Ecclesiastes, often attributed to his later years, he reflects on everything he had built. He looks at his palaces, his gardens, his pools, and his gold, and he calls it all hevel, a Hebrew word meaning vapor or breath. He realized that wealth is a shadow. It can buy the finest bed, but it cannot buy sleep. It can buy the most beautiful women, but it cannot buy love. It can buy the respect of nations, but it cannot buy a single extra second of life. The man who had everything concluded that without a sense of purpose and a connection to something higher, wealth is just a gilded cage. This is the Solomon paradox. The more you have, the more you realize that what you truly need cannot be bought. The decline of Solomon's empire happened with a terrifying speed after his death. The high taxes and the centralization of power had created a deep-seated resentment among the northern tribes. When his son, Rehoboam, refused to lighten the burden on the people, the kingdom split in two. The massive wealth that Solomon had accumulated was looted by the Egyptians just 5 years after his passing. The gold shields, the silver treasures, and the legendary artifacts were hauled away to a foreign land. It is a stark reminder that wealth is temporary, but the structures we build to acquire it leave a lasting mark. The gold vanished, but the reputation of Solomon's wisdom and his legendary riches became a permanent part of human culture. The realization we must take from Solomon's story is that wealth is not just a number on a screen or a pile of metal in a room. It is a tool of influence and a measure of control. Solomon didn't just have money, he had the world around him under his thumb. But in the end, his story tells us that history doesn't remember the balance sheet, it remembers the legacy. We don't talk about Solomon today because of his precise net worth. We talk about him because of the wisdom he sought and the complex, tragic way he handled the power that gold brought him. The richest man who ever lived may not be the one with the most money, but the one who truly understands the value of what money can never replace.